Hi and welcome. In this sequence, I'm going to talk about data sources, data formats, and data flow. So on my screen here, I have some typical formats you may deal with as a data scientist. Most of the time, if you're just experimenting, testing algorithms or models or whatever you've got, graphics, you're going to be working with text data. It could be just plain text files. It could be delimited. For example, the comma delimited file, CSV file, is pretty ubiquitous. But in other cases, if you have larger data sets or production quality data that's part of a larger system, you may have other sources. For example, Hive tables, Hive being the database part of Hadoop, SQL database tables from various relational databases, and some other formats that you may run into that are more specialized. And those come from a variety of sources. Typically, text comes from local files, but not always. An example of a Hive tables could be from Azure. You could have blobs and Azure tables. There's feeds over HTTP from, say, URLs or other kinds of data feeds, and lots of other SQL Server, lots of other possible data sources here. So let's look at the data flow. So this box here is kind of conceptually our experiment for an Azure ML experiment. And we get a data set there, and we're going to do something with it. We're going to do some transformations, etc. And the goal is to create a scored model. But we may have some other reference data. So reference data could be things like look up a customer's name given their account number, or look up the city given some sort of reference code, maybe a zip code or something like that. There's lots of possible things that a reference data can mean. But we need to use the import data module in Azure ML. We import from those outside sources, whether it's SQL, Hive, etc. And then we can do, say, a join in our transformations to bind that reference data to the correct bits of our input data set. And finally, when we go to production, we're going to create web services. We're going to publish this scored model as web service. And so we'll have a web service input, as you see. And that will be where the data is coming from. We're still going to have our reference data, which we're going to be importing and using and joining. We're still going to have our scored model, and then we're going to publish the web services output to our users. So very briefly, that was an overview of data types, data sources, and the data flow for Azure ML. And I should mention that data flow, even though I was specifically talking about Azure ML, is very general. Lots and lots of different platforms used for data science and machine learning have essentially that same data flow. So there's nothing particularly special about Azure ML in that general sort of schematic level.